The enemy called him a ghost, his allies called him a legend, and on the night he disappeared behind enemy lines, nobody believed he would ever return. In the frozen mountains near the border of a war-torn region, Sergeant Ethan Cross lay motionless beneath a layer of snow. Through the scope of his rifle, he watched enemy vehicles moving across a narrow valley nearly a mile away. The wind howled through the mountains, temperatures dropped below freezing, and visibility was poor. But Ethan remained perfectly still. He had been there for almost 16 hours. Most soldiers could not endure such conditions. Ethan was different. Throughout the military, he had earned a reputation as the finest sniper anyone had ever seen. Some claimed he could hit targets impossible for others. Some said he could disappear into terrain so completely that even trained scouts walked right past him. But Ethan never cared about stories. His only concern was completing the mission. Suddenly his radio crackled. Intelligence had confirmed that a dangerous enemy commander known as the Wolf was moving through the valley. The Wolf had spent years avoiding capture while leading attacks across the region. Multiple operations had failed to stop him. Tonight might be the last chance. Ethan adjusted his scope and scanned the convoy. 3 armored trucks moved slowly along the icy road. Guards surrounded them. Drones circled overhead. It was the most heavily protected convoy Ethan had ever seen. Then he spotted a black vehicle near the center. A figure stepped out briefly. Even from extreme distance, Ethan recognized the face, the Wolf. His finger rested on the trigger. The wind shifted. Ethan calculated speed, distance, temperature, altitude, and movement. Everything had to be perfect. One mistake would allow the commander to vanish forever. He exhaled slowly and fired. The shot echoed across the mountains. Seconds later, the target dropped. Chaos erupted below. Vehicles stopped. Soldiers rushed for cover. The mission appeared successful. Then Ethan noticed something strange. The body was moving. Through the scope, he realized the man was not the Wolf at all. It was a decoy. Suddenly, alarms sounded throughout the convoy. Somehow, they had expected the attack. It was a trap. Within moments, enemy forces flooded the surrounding mountains searching for the sniper. Ethan packed his equipment and moved immediately. Search teams closed in from every direction. Drones swept overhead. Dogs tracked his scent. Yet Ethan remained calm. He descended through narrow ravines and crossed frozen rivers while staying one step ahead of pursuit. By dawn, he reached a hidden extraction point where a helicopter waited. Back at headquarters, intelligence officers reviewed the mission. New information suggested the Wolf planned something far bigger than anyone imagined. Satellite imagery revealed unusual activity deep inside enemy territory. Convoys were gathering around an abandoned industrial complex. Communications traffic increased dramatically. Something important was about to happen. Military leaders assembled for an emergency briefing. A map appeared on the screen. The industrial complex sat nearly 100 miles behind enemy lines. Reconnaissance attempts had failed. Drones disappeared. Scouts never returned. Nobody knew what was hidden there. Ethan studied the images carefully. Then he noticed something others missed. Several buildings had recently been renovated. New roads connected underground structures. Heavy security surrounded a central warehouse. Whatever existed there was valuable. The commander's orders were simple. Ethan would infiltrate the area alone, identify the threat, and if possible, locate the Wolf. It would be the most dangerous mission of his career. 3 nights later, he crossed the border under cover of darkness. Carrying only essential equipment, he traveled through forests, mountains, and abandoned villages. Enemy patrols passed within feet of his position more than once. Each time he remained invisible. Days later, Ethan finally reached a ridge overlooking the industrial complex. What he saw shocked him. Hundreds of soldiers guarded the facility. Armored vehicles surrounded every entrance. Powerful radar systems scanned the skies. Yet it was not the defenses that concerned him most. In the center of the complex stood a massive structure hidden beneath camouflage nets. Through his scope, Ethan could see engineers and technicians working around the clock. Whatever they were building was nearly complete. As darkness fell, he moved closer. Crawling through mud and tall grass, he reached an observation point less than 500 yards away. There he listened to conversations and monitored radio traffic. Piece by piece, the truth emerged. The Wolf was preparing an operation capable of changing the entire war. Deep beneath the facility was a command center coordinating attacks across multiple regions. If activated, the network could overwhelm military defenses within days. Ethan transmitted everything back to headquarters. Command immediately ordered an assault. But there was one problem. The attack force would not arrive for 48 hours. Ethan's mission was now to survive, remain hidden, and continue gathering intelligence. Then something unexpected happened. Through the scope, he finally saw the wolf. The real wolf, standing near the command center entrance. For years, no one had managed to get this close. Ethan had a clear view, a clear shot. The mission could end right there. But before he could act, a spotlight suddenly illuminated his position. Someone had found him. The spotlight burned through the darkness and locked directly onto Ethan's position. Instantly, alarms exploded across the facility. Searchlights swept the hillside while soldiers rushed toward him from every direction. Ethan rolled behind a rock, just as bullets struck the ground where he had been lying seconds earlier. The wolf had anticipated the possibility of a sniper and prepared an entire counter-surveillance network around the base. Ethan grabbed his rifle and moved. He sprinted through the darkness, weaving between trees and rocky outcroppings while enemy patrols closed in. Drones filled the sky. Dogs tracked his scent. Thermal cameras searched every inch of the mountainside. Most soldiers would have been captured within minutes. Ethan survived because he never stopped adapting. Reaching a narrow canyon, he climbed down a nearly vertical cliff and disappeared into a river running through the valley. The freezing water masked his heat signature and confused the tracking dogs. For hours he moved silently downstream while enemy forces searched the wrong direction. By sunrise he had escaped, but the situation had changed. The wolf now knew an infiltrator was operating near the facility. Security doubled overnight. Headquarters radioed new orders. The assault force was still 24 hours away. Ethan's mission was no longer observation. He had to find a way to delay the activation of the command center until reinforcements arrived. That night he returned to the complex. Hidden beneath darkness, he approached the outer perimeter and studied the defenses. Guard towers overlooked every road. Motion sensors covered the fences. Armored patrols circled continuously. Yet Ethan noticed a weakness. Supply trucks entered through a maintenance tunnel beneath the facility. The entrance received less attention because everyone believed it was impossible to reach undetected. For Ethan, impossible was often just another word for difficult. Using the terrain for cover, he reached the tunnel and slipped inside. The underground passage stretched for hundreds of yards beneath the mountain. Pipes lined the walls. Machinery echoed in the distance. Moving carefully, Ethan infiltrated deeper into the facility than anyone before him. Soon he reached the command center itself. Hidden behind a maintenance platform, he observed dozens of operators monitoring communications, radar systems, and battlefield networks. Large screens displayed troop movements across multiple regions. In the center stood the wolf, calm, confident, certain of victory. Ethan activated a miniature camera and transmitted everything to headquarters. Military analysts watched in disbelief. For the first time, they could see the entire operation. The intelligence alone would change the course of the conflict. But Ethan wasn't finished. Studying the room, he identified the facility's main power system. If disabled, the command network would collapse. Unfortunately, the generators were protected by heavily armed guards. Destroying them would reveal his presence. Ethan knew there would be no easy escape afterward. He checked his watch. Reinforcements were still hours away. There was only one choice. Moving silently through maintenance corridors, he reached the generator chamber. Massive turbines thundered around him. Security personnel stood watch nearby. Ethan planted explosive charges at critical points throughout the room. Then he disappeared back into the shadows. Minutes later, a warning siren echoed through the facility. Someone had discovered unusual activity on a surveillance camera. Guards flooded the hallways. The wolf immediately ordered a lockdown. Doors sealed throughout the complex. Search teams spread out. Ethan's window was closing. Reaching a safe distance, he detonated the charges. The explosion shook the mountain. Lights vanished. Screens went dark. Alarms screamed. The entire command network collapsed within seconds. Confusion spread everywhere. Soldiers ran through blackened corridors while emergency systems struggled to activate. The wolf realized exactly what had happened. Furious, he ordered every available unit to hunt down the infiltrator. What followed became the stuff of military legend. Alone inside a hostile fortress, Ethan evaded hundreds of enemy troops while guiding incoming assault forces toward the facility. Through smoke-filled hallways and damaged tunnels, he continued transmitting vital intelligence. Finally, he reached an exit leading to the mountains. But standing in his path was the wolf himself. The two men stared at one another across the darkness. For years, one had hunted from the shadows while the other had avoided capture. Now they stood face to face. The wolf raised his weapon. Ethan reacted first. A brief exchange echoed through the tunnel. Moments later, the wolf fell. His campaign was over. Ethan emerged from the facility just as helicopters appeared overhead. Allied forces stormed the complex. By dawn, the command center had been captured. The operation that threatened to change the war had been stopped. News of the mission spread rapidly. Across the military, soldiers spoke about the sniper who infiltrated an impossible fortress alone and survived. Some stories exaggerated the details, others became myths. Ethan ignored them all. Weeks later, he returned to the mountains where it had started. Sitting quietly on a ridge overlooking the valley, he watched the sunrise in silence. There were no reporters, no celebrations. No medals being handed out. Just the cold wind and another mission completed. Yet among soldiers who heard the story, one belief remained unchanged. If the impossible needed to be done, there was only one man they would call: Sergeant Ethan Cross, the ghost sniper.